learn how to use my clicker tonight. Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks for having me. You met Lindsay before. I'm going to hog the stage for the first part of this presentation, and then she's going to join me for some Q&A afterwards. What we talked about, or what in that glowing introduction, one of the words or one of the phrases mentioned is metabolic flexibility, and that's my new through line. That's the thing that I think is the most important concept to grasp in not just weight loss and in diet and nutrition, but in accessing good health overall. So throughout this talk, and I want you to kind of keep in the front of your mind this concept of metabolic flexibility. Now what metabolic flexibility means is basically it's the ability of your body to extract energy from whatever substrate is available at the time. So it could be the fat on your plate, it could be the fat stored in your fat cells, could be the fat stored in your muscles, could be the glucose in your bloodstream, could be the glycogen in your muscles or your liver, could be the carbohydrates on your plate, could be the protein, could be the ketones that your liver makes. Metabolic flexibility allows you to access all of this stuff in a way that's seamless, that doesn't negatively impact you, that in fact positively impacts you, has you having more energy, maintaining ideal body weight, muscle mass, not getting sick, not getting hungry, all the things that we're sort of looking for in general when we're trying to craft an eating strategy for ourselves. So metabolic flexibility. So that, now, with that having begun as an overarching theme, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to use this clicker here. Oh, first one worked. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of how I got to where I am today and how I got to the realizations that I have. And, you know, it's more than a 30-year experience. I mean, I started looking into health and fitness when I was 11. I was just a geeky kid who grew up in a small fishing village in Maine and didn't have much else to do. I didn't want to fish, and I didn't want to do any of the things that my contemporaries were doing. So I started looking into ways in which I could live longer. I was really interested in longevity at that early age. Started reading a lot of books on health and longevity. There weren't a lot, by the way, in those days. Many in this room will remember Adele Davis. She was sort of a pioneer in that whole thing. I lived 1.5 miles from school, and I just found it much more convenient to jog to and from school than to take the bus. I could always beat the bus both ways, and I was interested in saving time, so I started jogging when I was in my early teens. And at the same time, I was reading books on, again, in this sort of health and fitness world, read Ken Cooper's book on aerobics, which suggested that this jogging that I was doing was good for my heart, and I would live longer. So it all sort of came together, and I was running to school, and again, I was reading these books, and I was trying to orchestrate a diet, an eating strategy, again, cooking my own meals at 12, 13 years old. So in my freshman year in high school, I was a fairly smart kid, if I do say so myself, and I placed out of some of the courses I should have been in, and I wound up in an all-senior PE course, right? And I got brutalized in that. I mean, all the seniors in high school can be bad. Seniors in Upper Maine, who have a really salt of the earth background could be even meaner. So it was a pretty tough year for me in my freshman year in high school. But spring rolled around, spring track rolled around, and while I was too small to play football, basketball, baseball, hockey, any of the sort of more popular sports, I went out for spring track. And the next thing you know, I'm winning the mile and the 2 mile, and sometimes the pole vault, and I'm like the high point man on the track team. So I got some cred there. I got some good credibility, and I got my feet kind of firmly set in being an athlete and in terms of competition. Went on to college, where I was captain of the cross-country team and captain of the track team. The more time went by, and the more I ran, and the more I looked into, how I could enhance my performance, the better I was performing, and the better I was doing as an athlete. And so I started to think in terms of maybe qualifying for the U.S. Olympic trials in the marathon. Now, all this time, I'm doing the work, I'm running, but I'm also interested in ways in which I can enhance performance through diet and through supplementation and through other techniques. Now, in those days, the conventional wisdom was you fueled the miles with lots of carbohydrates, right? You had to manage your glycogen stores, and so you had to eat a lot of carbs. So carb loading was the term of several decades, and you had to load up on the carbs if you wanted to run 100 miles a week, which I did for about 7 years. And so I got pretty good, and I got pretty fast, and I did very well in some of my competitions. But I was falling apart on the inside. So as strong as my performing was in a metric that looked at times and finishes, I had osteoarthritis in my feet, I had tendonitis in my hips, I had irritable bowel syndrome that ran my life, I had upper respiratory tract infections 6, 7, 8 times a year, I had lingering sinus issues after those. I mean, it's crazy that, I'm a guy who wanted to do the right thing. Like, tell me what I got to do, and I will do it. I have the discipline. I'll put the miles in. I'll eat the food you tell me to eat. Just tell me what the right information was. And it turns out that the information of the day, the conventional wisdom of the day, was not working for me. It was not appropriate for me. And so I wound up having to quit competing because of all of the maladies, all these injuries that I'd had. And I sort of took a step back, and I said, well, how can I be strong and fit and live a long, healthy life, which is what I wanted to from the beginning. But how can I do that without all the pain and suffering and sacrifice and discipline and calorie counting and portion control and everything else that seemed to be involved in accessing that better health? So I took a step back. I started doing research. I started looking at ways in which we might alter our health through other inputs besides just the physical, just the working out part of it. And I started looking at the concept of healthy fats. I started looking at maybe how damaging sugar was to our overall health and wasn't necessarily even beneficial for the types of training that I was doing. At the same time, I started coaching other athletes. So I was no longer competing at a high level, but I was coaching high-level athletes. And I started to develop an ability and a skill to work with other people to bring out the best in them. And one of the things I noticed early on was that I was training too much. And so I started to convince athletes, top athletes, some of the best athletes in the world, you train too much. If you just cut back your training a little bit and reconfigure it, you'll actually perform better and you won't be as beat up. So I started writing books about training and books about maybe now how you change your diet around, and maybe let's look at not so much sugar, let's look at reducing the carbs a little bit and increasing healthy fats because we want to support all of the elements of health that require that we actually consume fats, good fats. I was coming across all this amazing information and all this great research that no one else was really putting out there in the world at the time. The internet was just sort of coming into fashion, and television was just way too expensive as a means to get this information out there. So in 2006, I started writing about all these cool things that I discovered in the research and the science. So I started Mark's Daily Apple in 2006, and it was my opportunity to espouse my wisdom and knowledge and to kind of create a little discussion and create a community based around these things that I discovered and inviting other people to comment and participate. And it grew quite rapidly. In those days, there were only a couple of us doing blogging in the ancestral sort of paleo-primal world. This sort of new concept of the paleo diet was just coming on the scene. It was called Mark's Daily Apple because I was going to write something every day for a year. And then at the end of a year, I would have written everything there was to know about diet and exercise, and so I could just let it be evergreen forever. And of course, that didn't happen. So now it's like maybe it should be twice a day because there's so much cool stuff that keeps, popping up. 2009, I wrote, 2008, Primal Blueprint was a book that I couldn't find. Went to 20 publishers. I couldn't find anyone to publish it. It was like, that's crazy stuff. Like, you're spouting off all this bizarre stuff about fats aren't even bad for you and exercise is not the right way to lose weight. What are you saying? Nobody believes that. So I published it myself and did really well. We've sold well, I'll give you the numbers. It's kind of a funny story in the next slide. But and then just to get to where we are today. So I was writing so much about food, and I was putting up recipes every Saturday, and I was writing about how to make your own mayonnaise and how to make your own ketchup and how to make things that you couldn't find in the store, so you may as well make it yourself at home. I was writing so much about this idea that once you clean up your diet and once you get rid of sugars and once you get rid of industrial seed oils and once you get rid of processed carbohydrates and grains, the list is kind of a small list. That's left that you can eat, right? But it's what you put on it. It's the sauces, the dressings, the toppings, the herbs, the spices, the methods of preparation that give all of this cool, healthy food meaning and give it variety and make it enticing and exciting to keep eating it. But I realized in all of this writing that no company was making the kind of sauces and dressings that would fit my specifications for something that I would put on my food to enhance the flavor. And those two specifications are it had to taste awesome and it had to have clean ingredients. And no one was doing that. So in 2014, I started this company called Primal Kitchen with the idea that we were going to make these sorts of sauces, dressings, toppings, snacks, and things that people wanted to eat, but were afraid to eat because in the current configuration, look, let's face it, they're not that good for you. For 40 years, you said, yes, you can have some mayonnaise, but just use a little bit of it because it's not that good for you. It'll taste good, but it's not that good for you. So use mayonnaise sparingly, or just spritz some dressing on your salad. Or as Oprah used to say, take your fork and dip it in the dressing, and then go over and pick up a piece of lettuce. Jesus. So anyway, I saw a whole opportunity here to make the sorts of things that the sauces and the dressings that the more you put on the food, the healthier that meal became. That was sort of my goal. So now Mark's Daily Apple it still is one of the top go-to resources for people looking for information in this better for you space. The Primal Blueprint has sold thousands of copies. So the original thing when my team was making the slides up, it said hundreds of thousands of copies. It's actually 500,000. So now it says thousands. Well, at least they didn't put hundreds. Has sold hundreds of copies, right? Keto Reset Diet, which came out in October, is New York Times bestseller. And we now, in Primal Kitchen, we now have 40 products. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. Now let's talk about the cool stuff, right? Let's start to get into metabolic flexibility and talk about what we're seeking here. The idea behind the primal philosophy from day one was that our genes, our DNA, our genes expect us to be strong and lean and fit and happy and healthy and productive and loving and all the things that we want to be. Our genes expect that of us. These genes were forged in millions of years of evolution, 2.5 million years of human evolution, and they expect certain inputs. And when we don't give our genes those inputs, the genes they go a different direction. So we can control how our body burns fat. We can control whether or not our body stores fat. The genes determine how we build muscle or not, how our immune system supports ourselves or not. Genes can have a tremendous effect on our mood, whether or not we're depressed. Genes can be very instrumental in ultimately getting to the point where we become energetic because we built more mitochondria in the muscles. So it's the input that we give our genes that really determines how we renew, rebuild, regenerate, recreate ourselves on a day-to-day, on a minute-to-minute basis. So my goal for the last 30 years has been to discover these hidden genetic switches that we all have and ways in which we can manifest that strong, lean, fit body that we want, or that healthy, happy, productive person that we want to be, through food, through the choices of exercise that we choose to do, through how much sleep we get, how much sun exposure we get, how much play we engage in, how often we use our brains. All of these things are what we call epigenetic factors that influence how our genes express themselves and recreate us. So that's the primal philosophy. And modern health crises arise from poor inputs. The type 2 diabetes epidemic in this country, which continues to to run rampant. 35, 40 million people either diagnosed or undiagnosed but still have type 2 diabetes. And a lot of people assume, well, that's just, I have bad genes. I can't do anything about it. I got bad genes and my parents, it's their fault. Type 2 diabetes is a pretty, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a pretty stupid disease to have because you don't have to have it. It's completely fixable, it's completely curable with the right kind of inputs at the right kind of time. And people who get type 2 diabetes, it's not defective genes, it's actually very efficient genes just adapting to the signals that you're giving your genes. I don't want to exercise that much. I'm going to continue to eat unhealthy oils that have a lot of omega-6 and damaged fats in them that are going to be incorporated into my cells and are going to affect how my body responds to insulin. I'm going to keep eating sugar because my doctor said that as long as I take my medicine, I can have my dessert. And it's just ridiculous how the medical community has looked at type 2 diabetes, which is an epidemic, and decided it seems like it's a normal part of just being an American and getting older, and I'm going to have, at some point, I'll have type 2 diabetes. It's ridiculous. It all comes down to the inputs you give your genes. So food is the foundation of wellness. Step one, this is the basis. Primal Blueprint rule number one, eat lots of plants and animals and insects. That was, because we're following the primal sort of model from hunter-gatherers 50,000 or 100,000 or a million years ago. They ate a lot of insects. People, by the way, around the world eat a lot of insects now too, but I'm not suggesting you do that, but eat plants and animals, right? It's pretty simple. That also means avoid toxic things. So it means avoid frankenfoods, trans fats, adulterated foods, additives, preservatives, artificial colors, dyes. Those are things that you pretty much know, right? I mean, you know enough to avoid those sorts of things. But there's an area sort of on the cusp in between these where we can talk about maybe some assumptions that you had over the past that eating high amounts of carbs was still something that you could do as long as it was organic or as long as it was enriched or something like that. So we'll have a little bit of discussion about that. The Primal Blueprint food pyramid has always had vegetables at its base. I'm a big fan of vegetables for their micronutrition. I'm a big fan of vegetables for their fiber. I'm a big fan of vegetables for the way they taste. Like, anybody heard of the carnivore diet going around now? It's like, fine if you want to try that for a couple of weeks, but as a lifestyle, I'm not going to give up my vegetables. I like as much variety as possible. Protein from meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds. Healthy fats. Healthy fats is a relatively new term in the lexicon of health, healthy living, but it's quite clear now that healthy fats are not just not bad for you, they're actually good for you, and we should seek them out, particularly monounsaturated fats, particularly certain omega-3 fats. And then moderation foods, chocolate, little piece of dark chocolate once in a while. I got nothing against starchy tubers, potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. Now we get to how do we individualize this concept of eating primally? And the first thing we want to talk about really is this experiment of one. Because while everybody builds muscle the same way, and everybody burns fat the same way, and everybody makes neurotransmitters the same way, it's the degree to which we do these things that varies from individual to individual based on family genes, for instance. So some of us are really good at building muscle. Some of us are not that good at it. Some of us are really good at burning fat. Some of us are really good at storing fat. So that's where we start to talk about individual experimentation and playing around with what we call your macros. So your macros are your protein, your fat, and your carbohydrate, and as a percentage of your diet. So that's kind of the basis of this experiment. This carbohydrate curve was created about 14 years ago on the back of a napkin. And to this day, it's like one of my proudest achievements because it really does, I think it encapsulates like pretty much everyone. So if you look at, this is looking at the amount of carbohydrates we might have access to in a day, and then this is what happens with, where we burn fat or maintain or store more fat. So most people in this country today consume in excess of 300 grams of carbohydrate. And that's just way too much, I think, for just about anybody. There's nobody that needs 300 grams of carbohydrate a day, unless maybe you're a marathoner or an ultracyclist or some sort of athlete who's really plowing through a lot of carbs on a daily basis. Now, when you eliminate added sugars and when you eliminate enriched flour and you eliminate grains from your diet, which I recommend everyone try, and you eat, most of your carbs come from vegetables, it's almost impossible to get more than 150 grams of carbohydrate in a day. It's almost impossible. You have to overeat to do that. So 150 grams a day becomes this that becomes a dividing line under which I guarantee you're going to be a lot healthier, you're going to have a lot more energy, you're going to burn more fat, you're going to achieve your weight loss goals and arrive at your ideal body composition effortlessly. Anything above 150, we call it insidious weight gain because the body takes the carbohydrate, and any excess carbohydrate, which converts to glucose, raises insulin. Insulin is a nutrient storage hormone, so when insulin is high, it is trying to find a way to store excess calories of any kind as body fat. So we use the amount of carbohydrate in your daily diet as kind of a metric as to what's going on with insulin. So insidious means that if you gain 2 pounds a year, that's not that much, is it? Right? Well, that's 40 pounds over 20 years. That's a lot, right? So this stuff adds up. So it's insidious. You don't feel it happening when it's like in real time, but over the time you look back and you go, whoa, what happened? How did I get here? So now we have under 100 grams, we start to talk about the weight loss sweet spot. And I know a lot of people have been on the Primal Blueprint eating strategy for a long time, and 100 grams is probably where they dial themselves in on a regular basis. And then under 50 is ketogenic. So we'll start to talk a little bit about what that looks like. So I was very happy taking my own advice for 15 years, eating primally, right? I was having 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maintaining energy levels, maintaining muscle mass, never getting sick, not being hungry, happy. I was fine. Why should I change anything, right? But I started reading about this not new, it's been around for a long time, but this idea that people could get to another level of fat burning, another level of energy by going into a state of what we call ketosis. And so I started looking at a ketogenic diet for myself, just as a way of experimenting. I've been chasing performance my whole life, right? So this was a new way of me breaking through the comfort zone of what I'd been existing in for 15 years and saying, maybe there's another level of performance that I could access. I'll try this keto thing. So I did a 90-day ketogenic experiment, and it was really eye-opening for me. I had more energy. I did have a little bit more muscle mass. I slept better. I felt like my recovery happened overnight on fewer hours, probably because of the ketones that I was producing. I felt I had greater mental clarity. I had all these sort of little aha moments that said, well, wait a minute. If I thought I was fine doing what I was doing and now I could get another level of performance, what would that mean for people who've stalled in their weight loss efforts? What would that mean for people who still have some inflammation that they're trying to deal with and hadn't been able to really rectify that through a standard paleo eating strategy? And so that sort of begat this idea that I'll do a book on the ketogenic diet, but I want to be clear that my idea of keto isn't necessarily that once you go keto, you spend the rest of your life in ketosis. No, my idea of ketogenic diet is to use it as a tool, as a strategy, to refine your metabolic flexibility. In other words, spend 6 weeks in ketosis and take on all of the benefits, the anti-inflammatory benefits, the benefits in increasing the amount of mitochondria, where fat burns, the benefits in increasing the amount of fat-burning enzymes, the benefits in actually burning off more stored body fat. One of the major benefits, which is getting a handle on appetite, hunger, and cravings, which I think is probably the when I do the analysis, the biggest issue for everyone is how do I handle my hunger, appetite, and cravings. So the idea behind the Keto Reset, the book is called the Keto Reset Diet, is it's a stair-step approach to take you, hold your hand and walk you gently into ketosis, rather than what I've seen other modalities do, which is basically slam you into ketosis and to go from 300 grams a day of carbs down to 20 or 25, and that causes a lot of problems for a lot of people. I think that stair-stepping your way into this is well advised. So the first kind of phase, the first 3 weeks, would be just getting rid of those things that we know we should be getting rid of: the sweetened beverages, the pies, the cakes, the candies, the cookies, the ice cream, the rice, the pasta, the cereal, the bread, and just coming down to real food again, getting back to meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, a little bit of fruit, some starchy tubers once in a while, the things that we know we should be eating, the things that we know the body thrives on, right? And so when you take that first step, it doesn't really matter, that you even count calories or that you even count macros. It's really about eliminating the crap that was causing the inflammation, that was causing the medical problems, maybe the diabetes or the polycystic ovarian syndrome or the inflammation and the arthritis. A lot of these things subside when you just get rid of the offending foods that you had assumed you were going to be able to eat for the rest of your life. So that's step one. In step one, we have a test that you take in the Keto Reset Diet, and that is basically, how do you feel? Like at the end of 3 weeks, can you get up in the morning and not eat breakfast and not have it ruin your day? Well, if the answer is yes, it means you're becoming better at burning fat. The idea here in achieving metabolic flexibility is we want to teach the body how to burn fat, how not to have to rely on carbohydrate every 3 hours for the rest of our lives, right? Which is what most people do. Breakfast can't, of course, the most important meal of the day is breakfast, right? No, it's not. But that's what you've been told through the marketing, right? So we want to be able to get so good at burning our own stored body fat that we don't even need to eat. And I'm not suggesting you don't have to, that you have to go long periods of time without eating, but that is one of the benefits of this metabolic flexibility. Is you become so good at burning off your own stored body fat, you don't need to eat. You don't feel compelled to eat. You don't feel hungry. So most people who go keto, one of the first things they notice is, damn, I was eating way too much food. 3 meals a day is too much food. I just feel uncomfortable eating 3 times a day. And that's like one of the first things that we notice. So a lot of people have what they call a compressed eating window, and they might eat, like I eat at 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the afternoon, and then I eat at 7 or 7:30 at night. I eat 2 meals a day most days. Some days I only eat 1 meal a day. I don't get hungry, I don't get hangry, I don't get irritable. I'm just good at burning fat. What can I tell you, right? I've taught myself how to burn fat. I'm good at it. And I teach people how to do that for themselves. So developing this metabolic flexibility empowers you. It unburdens you of having to eat carbohydrates every couple of hours to replenish blood sugar. What's happening then when you go keto is you're restricting the amount of carbohydrates that you're consuming. You're telling your body there's not going to be a lot of glucose, so let's go to plan B. And plan B, which is we've been set up for this since birth, we're going to burn fat in the muscles. So our primary source of energy throughout the day is not going to be carbohydrate and glucose now, it's going to be fat. The muscles become really good at burning fat. 60, 70, 80, 90% of the energy throughout the day now comes from the fat as opposed to from the glucose. The brain, which has been used to burning glucose your whole life and is what has been driving this need to eat every 3 or 4 hours. The brain, which has been used to consuming glucose, which has been telling you, I think I'm going to pass out if I don't eat some carbohydrate, if I don't have a bagel for a break. That subsides because now your liver is producing ketones from fat. So it's such a cool system where you've got this, everybody has stored body fat. I mean, I'm a fairly fit guy. I'd show you my abs, but it would be inappropriate. And, but I've got 20 pounds of usable fat on my body. And I could live for 35 days on that not eating. I'm not going to do that, but I could because that's how our bodies are set up in terms of evolution. So when you start to restrict carbohydrate and start to tell the body you're not going to get that much glucose, the body goes, great, let's do this. Burn fat, send some of the fat to the liver to become ketones, send the ketones to the brain, where the brain now uses the ketones for fuel and doesn't need glucose. It needs a little bit, but we can make our own glucose. You don't even have to consume carbohydrate. The body makes glucose. So it becomes almost like a closed system. Then there's this amazing protein sparing effect of being in ketosis, where the ketones now cause the body to retain amino acids that it otherwise would have wasted, would have squandered. And so our daily requirement for amino acids drops as a result of being keto. To the extent that, again, you can go long periods of time. You can go days without eating and not suffer loss of muscle mass, loss of energy, any of the things that we used to fear when we thought, well, geez, if I don't eat 3 to 5 meals a day, my body will go into cannibal mode and I'll consume myself. Because that was the mantra for the longest period of time, right? And by the way, if you're a sugar burner, if you're somebody who hasn't built the metabolic machinery to burn fat and you're still dependent on carbohydrates, then if you do skip meals, that does happen. Then you actually do go cannibal because you haven't done the work. So now you restrict carbohydrates and the brain goes, geez, whoa, what are we going to do here? First and foremost, let's send cortisol throughout the body and rip apart some of our muscle tissue and take some of the amino acids in the muscle and send it to the liver to make glucose to feed the brain. That's that catabolic reaction that you have if you haven't become fat adapted and keto adapted. All that stuff goes away when you become fat and keto adapted. So we're going to talk like who should do a keto diet. I mean, I think everybody would be advised to try one. Now Lindsay's going to talk a little bit about maybe women who have maybe thyroid issues, men too. Women and men are a little bit different, you think. So there's different responses. How often? I mean, it's up to you. I do a keto reset once a year, and I live in what I call the Keto Zone. And here's what this means, and it comes back to metabolic flexibility. When you're metabolically flexible, you can have a day where you have 30 grams of carbs, and the next day have 190 or 210 grams of carbs, and not feel any different. And really, it's all about how you feel. The rest of it doesn't matter. You're not doing anything bad to yourself. It's, how do I feel? How's my energy? How's my muscle mass? So you can go in and out of these days of some days low carb, some days higher carb, as long as you're not going off the rails and eating crap again. That's the metabolic flexibility that we're talking about. Some days I can go without eating at all. I had a serious couple of weeks in this deal that just went down with Kraft Heinz. And, I had days where I would have 6 hours of phone calls back to back and couldn't eat. All of a sudden, it's 7 o'clock at night. Oh, I guess I'll have dinner. And then the next day, it's 7 o'clock again. I haven't eaten yet. It's fine. That's the beauty of this. That's the empowering part of this, is that you don't need to eat that much to have the energy and to have maintain the muscle mass, not get sick, and most importantly, not have hunger drive you off the rails. Hunger, appetite, and cravings is the bane of everyone who's ever tried to access good health, right? And if you tried to do it just by restricting calories because you were a carbohydrate-dependent individual and you hadn't done the work to burn fat and build a metabolic machinery to burn ketones, then it's just almost impossible to cut calories and live that way for any length of time. You have to reconfigure, you have to reprogram your genes to become a fat-burning beast and to become good at accessing these ketones. So how often? I mean, again, it's really up to you. Once you do the work, some people choose to stay keto for, I know, we have friends who have been keto for 10 years, 15 years. They love it. That's all they're ever going to do. And it's not because they're necessarily, driven by this paradigm. It's comfortable. It's convenient for them. They don't like taking, most of these guys eat once or twice a day. That's it. They're very active. They're very fit. Everything about what they're doing seems to be working extremely well for them. So I wouldn't change that. On the other hand, I have a food company because I like to eat. By the way, I have 8 cookbooks now, something like that. And people say, well, geez, Mark, you must love to cook. I go, no, I like to eat. I like to have people cook for me. And so that's why I have all these cookbooks. Yeah. So, and then ultimately why keto, and I'll just rehash some of the benefits, but I mean, it's a great way to achieve ideal body composition. It's a great way to unburden yourself of having to eat carbohydrates throughout the day. It's a great way to reduce inflammation. It's a great way to achieve a mental clarity that you might not have otherwise been able to achieve. And I think ideally, it's a great way to free up yourself from hunger, cravings, and appetite that I know many of you in this room, I know that has probably run your life for a long time. So that's why we would do it. So the ultimate goal of metabolic flexibility, again, is to derive more energy from fat and ketones and less dependency on carbohydrate, to manage your appetite, and to have steady energy throughout the day. Those are the basic reasons. A lot of people, there are medical clinics now using a keto diet to cure type 2 diabetes. There are medical clinics using a keto diet to achieve dramatic weight loss in people for whom regular diets have not worked. Is that the end of our? There it is. So I could go on for a day about all this stuff, but I wanted to kind of give you an encapsulation in just a broad view of this, and I would love to, and Lindsay and I would love to entertain any questions you have now about this, and then I think after we finish that, we'll do a book signing if you want to do that. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. In the back.
2 questions. One, I wanted to know how old you are, and then the second question, how old do you want to be before you go on to the netherworld, wherever that may be?
Well, I'm 65, and like how? I guess I'll have to show the abs when I go. I won't. My thing is, this thing about longevity bothers me a little bit because I do feel like there's an end point beyond which I'm not sure I even want to live too long, right? I think I see life as a finite experience. I cannot imagine living as some uploaded consciousness into a machine, which is what some people are talking about now, like in forever. It's like, what do you do when you don't wake up in the morning? What do you do? I don't know. I don't get it. So I'm like, look, if I get to 95 and I can still play Frisbee, I'll be good. That's I don't really have any of those aspirations. What I want to be is I want to be mobile and have access to my thoughts. So to me, those are the 2 big defining experiences of getting older. I want you to be mobile and have access to the world, and I want you to have access to your thoughts and your memories. And of course, Alzheimer's is a big issue for a lot of people, and dementia and things like that. So, that's one of the things that we can address with a keto diet, by the way. And we're looking at, I'm not going to make promises here, but there's a lot of research going on in that field now.
All right, thanks, Mark, for being here. So I'm a nutritional therapist practitioner that's reversed my own type 2 diabetes, and that's my focus for my clients. intermittent fast, try to get in the gym, been in keto for almost a couple years now. But my personal weight loss has been stagnant for 3, 4, 5 months. And I'm in ketosis. So based on what you're saying, should I up my carbs to over 50, below 100 to get in the sweet spot?
All right, where are you at now? What do you think you're at now?
No,
Not weight, just your carbs, sorry.
Oh, probably 20, sometimes 30 grams, but
Total?
Lindsay?
yeah, total, not net, total.
That's pretty restricted, you know, and so this is something that comes up all the time, right? Because weight loss is a primary goal for a lot of people. Happy bodies lose weight, and unhappy bodies hold on to weight. And there's lots of reasons why your body might be unhappy. It might be sick, it might be stressed, it might be overworked, right? And so I feel like, 20 grams of carbs is guaranteed to get you into ketosis, but I feel like it's also a pretty good path to becoming overstressed if you don't manage it really well. It's sort of like, to bring up the V word, the vegan diet, right? Which can be done, but it must be managed because you're restricting the input so very much. So I think that, based on my many, many years of experience with the Primal diet, and then now my several years of experience with the keto diet, you don't have anything to lose by upping your carbs to, say, 50 grams, or even trying a couple weeks at 75 or 100. It's not that people, when they start keto, they become afraid to stop keto because keto becomes the way, and then other things seem somehow unhealthy in comparison. And that's never been the case. Mark and I are always primal first and foremost. But once you've gone keto, I understand that there can be kind of a mental block about letting that go because it seems like it's such a powerful tool, but it's just one tool of many that can be effective. So I don't think you have anything to lose by trying 50 or 75 or 100 grams of carbs if they're coming from nutrient-dense, real food sources. You're not going to gain weight from eating another 50 grams of broccoli and Brussels sprouts and carrots and beets and even a sweet potato, which I don't know when the last time you let yourself have a sweet potato was, but they're great. And so, I just encourage you to experiment because experimenting is only going to yield, neutral and hopefully really positive results. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that if you look at the ancestral model, none of our ancestors were keto 100% of the time. Ketosis was a means of surviving long periods of time without eating. But long periods of time is a subjective term. It could be days, it could be a week or 2 or 3, but at some point more food would show up. The irony here is that we are all wired by evolution to overeat. That's actually a good thing. Just think about the design of a human being. You come across some food, you're going to eat as much as you need in real time, but then you're wired to consume more because your body has this amazing ability to take the extra energy and convert it to fuel that you carry around evenly distributed on your waist and hips. It's so freaking cool. I can't tell you. This is what got us to where we are, right? Instead of having to carry gallon jugs of fuel around with us, we get to store it on our bodies, and we get to use it in times of lack of food, right? But the other part of that is we have to be wired to be able to take that energy that we're carrying with us and burn it as fuel, right? And when you become metabolically flexible, you have both these skills. You can store it and you can burn it. And that's the human experience. So the human experience isn't 3 meals a day, definitely not 3 square meals a day. The human experience is a lot of food one day, a little food the next day, a lot the next day, no food for 5 days, 3 meals one day. It's all over the place. It's what we call fractal. And we're built to handle these different inputs, right? But we just, because of where we are in society, because of the advent of agriculture and the ability to store energy in the form of bricks of bread and pasta and all this other stuff, we just have access to way too many calories. And so we're born with this factory setting that wants us to be good at burning fat and using ketones, and then we never tap into it. Some of us never tap into it because we're always fed 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 5 times a day for our entire lives, and we never get to use that skill. So that's what we're teaching here is this skill. Now, once you've built the skill, once you've developed the metabolic machinery, it doesn't go away if you go out of ketosis, as long as you eat real food. So, in the case of the gentleman here, he's not going to lose the metabolic machinery that he built in the years of ketosis. He's just going to he's just going to give his body a different set of inputs for a while and see how the body reacts to that. And it may be that the body said, look, you've restricted carbs so much that I've had to do some adrenal issues, right? I've had to address some adrenal issues, or I've had to do a little bit of thyroid reconfiguring. I've had to twist the knobs around a little bit. Now, if you go back and you experiment with a little bit more carbs, maybe it'll shift the other direction. That's the experimental one that we talk about.
What's a square meal?
That's a good question. I use the term pejoratively, square meal, because it's like, what is a square meal? If you talk to somebody back in the 60s and 70s, a square meal breakfast would have been orange juice, pancakes, whatever, and you'd have had 150 grams of carbs before you went to work. So I don't like the term square meal. I'm sort of using it in the lexicon of the old paradigm of eating. Right now, a square meal is, I think, just a rack of lamb, and nothing else is a square meal as far as I'm concerned. So.
I think a frittata. I think a frittata is the perfect
Yeah,
square
okay,
meal.
there you go. Yeah.
But it's usually round.
Go ahead.
Hi, Mark. I followed your blog every day for the past 5 years, and I want to say thank you for helping hundreds and thousands of people get healthy, myself included. So thank you for all that you do. I just wanted to thank you. I'm like your biggest fan in this room right now. So I have a couple questions. So I follow the Primal Blueprint, and I lose 25 pounds. I feel great. I feel amazing. I look amazing. And then I eat a cupcake, and then I go off the rails. And then I'm off, and then the weight comes on. And I've done that, lost the same, gained and lost the same 25 pounds for the past 5 years. So how do I think of this as a lifestyle and not a diet and not something that's going to get me thin? So that would be one question, how to really truly embrace this as a lifestyle. And then two, when I'm back on the plan, how do I have patience? Because I want results like tomorrow. Like I want to lose that weight because I know it works and I want it like tomorrow. So I think it's getting out of my own way and the mindset.
Mindset. Ooh, it's like my favorite topic. I'm just going to tell you what worked for me when I was first starting Primal 10 years ago, long before I worked for Mark, was that I started, the thing that really kicked it into gear for me, that it was more than a diet, was that I started running. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to start running. In fact, Mark doesn't like how much I run, and I know this, and he's probably giving me side eye right now. I'm not going to look.
No judgment. No judgment. No.
But the point was that I started thinking about my body in terms of what it could do. It's not like I stopped thinking about what it looked like, but I just put this other layer on top of it. And for me, that was the thing that clicked it, was that I really had a concrete sense of what I wanted my body to do, like how I wanted my body to work for me. And so, I think there's lots of ways you can access that. You don't have to start running marathons or anything like that. But you can find ways, seek out ways that you are moving your body, that you're using your body to be in the world and not just be like an object that has, a gaze on it. So that to me is the big key. The other thing is that, we actually were just talking about this in our Keto Reset group yesterday, that you need to give yourself permission to accept that things aren't always going to be easy. So I think that a lot of people feel like if it's not easy, then that's a personal flaw. So I ate a cupcake, now I feel bad, I should have not been able to eat that cupcake. That is a reflection of me and not a reflection of the fact that our bodies are wired to like carbs and that cupcakes are delicious and that the messaging is out there and all that stuff. And once you start to get into a blame game, for a lot of us, all bets are off. So I think that, when I see people spiral, it's because they have decided that they have done something wrong, as opposed to just, I made a choice I probably wouldn't make again. And so that's where the mindset shift comes up.
I want to just talk a little bit about ideal body composition as well, because we have this picture in our mind about what our ideal body composition might be, and to the detriment of some of the trainers in the 80s, they would say, clip out a Victoria's Secret model and put it on your refrigerator, and that's your do a vision board. Bullshit. That stuff. That stuff doesn't work. So, You know, you can't aspire to be somebody else's body. Your body is your body. Your genes are your genes. As I say, we do things differently. Some of us build muscle much easier than others. Some of us don't build muscle without a lot of work. I'm one of those. I'm what they call a hard gainer. Some of us have a tough time losing weight. Some of us have a tough time gaining weight. We're all over the place in terms of predispositions, right? So your ideal body composition comes up, and what is the ideal body composition? Is it 17% body fat? Is it 20? No, it's where your body goes, damn, I like what you've done with the place. You lost some weight, you lost 25 pounds, you got energy, you're sleeping well, you're working out. This is phenomenal. And then your brain going, yeah, but it's not enough, and so now we got to go to the next level. Well, sometimes the next level, A, is a lot more difficult. B, might even negatively impact your health. So a lot of the fitness models you see are not healthy, right? Because they're just going way down that slippery slope just to get the look as opposed to appreciating the body they have right now and what they've done and how they've gotten there and the fact that they do have energy, they sleep well, they're not irritable, they're not hungry. All the things that you say you want are now coming together, and now you want more, right? So and it's not that you shouldn't want more, but there's a point at which you have to realize that wanting more means a whole new set of hurdles and obstacles, and you got to really be willing to go there. And I'm not suggesting that you should or should not go there, but when you make that choice, you may have to make a lot more sacrifices. Health might even be one of them. And you might get there and go, well, shit, that really wasn't even worth it, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is this just a couple more questions? How much time do we have?
I got time. I got a lot of time.
All right.
How can you tell if you're in ketosis?
So that's a great question. So there's a couple of ways to do it objectively, and one is you can do a blood. You could draw blood, and there's all sorts of meters that will look at how much beta hydroxybutyrate or acetone, how many ketones are in your bloodstream. So that's very objective. They have urine strips. You can pee on a urine strip, and the more purple it turns, that's an indication that you're creating ketones. There are breath meters that will show acetone, which is a direct reflection of how many ketones you're producing. But I'm going to get into a little bit of a semantic discussion here about ketosis. So, because you asked, how do you know you're in ketosis? Ketosis is a term, a medical term that describes an excess of ketones in the bloodstream. And one of the problems with this keto diet in this world we live in is that people are chasing ketones. They want to see the ketones. Oh, I'm in ketosis. Yay, I'm successful. No, we don't think you should be chasing ketones. You should be chasing results. Now, the results are, do I feel better? Do I have more energy? Do I wake up in the morning and I feel like jumping out of bed? Am I maintaining muscle mass? Am I not getting sick? Am I thinking clearly? Can I go all day without eating and not have it be a problem? All these things, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about a keto way of living. And so the term ketosis, almost by definition, means to a certain extent your body is not functioning ideally. And here's why. The body doesn't want to waste any energy doing stuff it doesn't need to do. Right? The body is very conservative. That's why we gain weight. It would rather hoard the energy than expend it, right? It's all about energy conservation. So the body doesn't want to make mitochondria if it doesn't have to. If you're feeding it glucose and carbohydrate all day long, the body goes, I don't need to make any mitochondria. We don't need to burn fat. Let's keep the fat because this clown's feeding us carbs all day. So you get this. You get into this lifestyle where you're not creating ketones, you're not burning fat, you're not accessing any of this metabolic state that we're trying to achieve. So when it comes to being in ketosis, the first couple of days in ketosis, you get out that meter, wow, 4.5 millimolar. I am so in ketosis, this is great. And over time, if you really are good at this and you start to exercise, you start to eat appropriately, what you'll find is that the longer people are in ketosis, the lower the ketones go. To the point that some people, we know people who are in ketosis who have been keto, I use the term just broadly, have been keto for 10 years, who eat 30 grams, 40 grams, 50 grams of carbs a day, max, who don't even register in ketosis on a normal 0.5 millimolar is what they say is the definition of being in ketosis, right? If you're over 0.5 millimolar. And I talk about people being 4.5 and 3. These guys will be 0.4. Why is that? Because they become so good at burning fat that all their muscles are doing all day long is just burning fat. And they don't even need glucose. And they don't even, by the way, you get so good at burning fat that the muscles, which initially can burn ketones, the muscles go, hey, we don't even need ketones. We're so good at burning fat. You save the ketones for the brain. Now the brain, which will use the ketones efficiently, the brain says, bring on the ketones. That's great. And I don't need that much in the way of glucose. And whatever glucose I do need, we can make through gluconeogenesis. So that's easy. And so the brain's fine. Now, if you look at the distribution of energy throughout the day, you will see that if you go to the gym and you do a leg day, and you do a heavy leg day, your leg muscles are going to use 30 times as much energy doing that workout as when you're resting. Maybe 40 or 50 times as much energy, right? The brain is just going along smooth. The brain's like, nope, we can handle this. The brain does not have wild energy swings and dips throughout the day, right? The brain has a steady sort of supply of requirement for energy. It might double, maybe, but it doesn't quadruple or quintuple. And so the liver kind of knows this. And the liver says, well, if we're going to be efficient, metabolically flexible and metabolically efficient, why would we waste ketones that we just piss out in the urine or breathe out in our breath or whatever? Why do we waste fat making ketones that we don't even need? Because the brain doesn't have that much of a requirement. And so you get to the point where the liver's just cranking out a little bit of ketones all day long, just enough for the brain. And this is where we get into this situation where you find people going, well, when I was a carb burner, and even when I first started keto, I was eating 3,500 calories a day, 2,700 calories a day, whatever it is. And now, God, there's some days I have 1,600 calories the whole day and I'm good. How can that possibly be? That's how it can possibly be, because you're not wasting energy. You become metabolically flexible, fat, ketones, and you've become metabolically efficient. You're extracting more energy from fewer calories. It really is a thing. Now you go, because I don't want to take up all your time, but I have this thing. I go to the gym and I see people on the treadmill and they're doing, 450 calories on the treadmill, watching that LED readout, right? And I was like, wow, man, you are just suffering and struggling and sweating and foaming at the mouth and stuff hanging out of your nose every day. And, you training for a 10K or a marathon or something? And I go, no, I just like to eat. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You go to the gym and you would put yourself through that misery just so you could earn a couple more bites of something you shouldn't eat in the first place? How ridiculous is that, right? And that's how people tend to think. People think, I want to have a fast metabolism, right? How many people think this is all about creating a fast metabolism? Boy, do I wish I had a fast metabolism. Boy, do I wish I could eat as much as you eat, because I have a slow metabolism. It's not about that. It's like as long as you can control hunger, appetite, and cravings, who cares how much or how little food you eat, right? Right? I mean, it's not a contest to see who can eat the most amount of food and get away with it. It's about how do I reconfigure my body so I'm energy efficient, so I'm metabolically flexible and I'm metabolically efficient, and I can get by on fewer calories. So I used to have this thing where I do a thought experiment. I go, well, one thing you can, like most people say, what's the most amount of food I can eat and not gain weight, right? That's how I live my life. What can I get away with? What's the biggest piece of cheesecake I can eat right now and not feel like crap, What can I get away with, right? And this is how so many people live their lives, right? I know there's people in this room, you just reverse it and go, okay, what's the least amount of food I can eat? Maintain muscle mass, maintain energy, not get sick, and most importantly, not be hungry. As long as you're not hungry, who cares? Right? So there's no medal for being, you know, Michael Phelps eating 11,000 calories of whatever it is today, stacks of pancakes. Who cares? As long as you have the energy and have all these other benefits are happening and you're not hungry, you win. Right? Any more questions? Oh, now there's a lot. Shit, okay.
Right. This is actually going to be our last question, and then we're going to get rolling into the book signings.
Well,
so that we have
while Mark signs books, I'll stand off to the side.
There we
That's
go.
cool. Yeah,
and
yeah.
handle
Okay, let's do that.
questions,
Yeah.
so-
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's great.
All right, one more.
All right, so last one. Here we go.
I was wondering if you could make a brief comment on keto and paleo and LDL numbers going up.
Yeah, so again, very nuanced, but basically, you know, we look at LDL in a whole different light when we're paleo and keto. Blood work becomes not as cut and dried as it was in the old paradigm. So you'll see that most people who engage in a keto strategy or a paleo strategy, their HDL will go up, their good cholesterol will go up, their LDL might go up a little bit, but their triglycerides will come way down. Their CRP will come way down, so other markers will come down. The question then becomes, well, is this a bad thing that my LDL cholesterol went up? And part of my response to that is, again, first of all, it depends on a lot of other factors. There's some genetic factors there. There's some certain parts of the population for which it is problematic. But when you eat more fat, you need more bile salts to digest the fat, and bile is made from cholesterol. So there's a reason that cholesterol, goes up. That's just not a direct result of you eating more fat or more saturated fat or whatever. So it's a very nuanced kind of thing. And then we can talk about particle size and density and particle numbers, and there's a lot of different ways to parse this. And it's not I won't give you a medical opinion on it right now, other than to say it's known that when people eat this way, there will be typically a rise in LDL. Sometimes we see a drop, by the way, but it's not good or bad, right or wrong, black or white at this point.
Yeah, I want to actually add something here, because what I see a lot in the paleo world and social media that I live in is people will say, help, I went to my doctor, my LDL numbers have gone up since I started eating more fat, he wants to put me on statins. And then 100 people say, your doctor's a dummy, definitely ignore him, you don't need a statin, you're going to live forever, your heart's perfect. And it's like, you don't even know this lady, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I definitely would want to urge people who have had this experience and are eating this way, if you go to your doctor and your cholesterol numbers are going up, first of all, educate yourself. And then secondly, what I'm really pleased to see is there's more and more and more doctors who have clued into this whole new way of eating and living. Don't just ignore your doctor. Find a doctor who knows what they're talking about, which is not a lot of them still, but there are so many more than there used to be. So the right answer is not to ignore an alarming cholesterol panel or lipid panel. It's to find a doctor that knows or has a better sense of whether it's actually alarming or not.
Right. Okay, I think that's it for this part of the evening. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Let's give a round of applause.